Welcome to another episode of the 100% Wild Podcast. I'm Mark Kenyon of Wire to Hunt. With me today is Matt Drury, and we're talking about scrapes today
Hello,
and all
hello.
sorts of different things related to scrapes.
How are you, buddy?
Not bad. I'm good to be here. Excited to get out hunting here soon too.
Yeah, it's this time of year where we're thinking scrapes and mock scrapes and rubs, and it's finally here, right? What we think about all year, it's finally getting close.
And it just keeps getting better from here.
Yeah,
That's
that's right.
that's what's really exciting.
That's
This is
right.
that ramp up period that I think bucks are getting excited and hunters are definitely getting excited.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Dad was telling me just this morning that he's moved a lot of his cameras to scrapes, which he leaves a lot of his cameras on big hub scrapes throughout
mhm.
the year. But he's saying that on his place, anyways, he's like, Matt, if you're on your lease, he goes, you need to start moving your cameras because they're starting to really light up for me. So I think the topic is timely here for us for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because literally that's what I just did yesterday. I was moving my cameras to all of them are set up on some type of scrape right now. So yeah, very relevant, very timely. And also with us though today, Matt, in addition to you and myself, we've got Tom Ware, right?
Absolutely. We got Tommy Ware. He's been with Drury Outdoors for a little over a decade now. He's been filming for us, and you've seen him on Natural Born. You've seen him on Bow Madness, and of course, our DVD series throughout the years. So, anybody that's watched knows that Tom has a way to get on big, mature bucks. It's through a lot of hard work and a lot of perseverance, but every year he seems to get it done. And so, we look forward to seeing what he has to share on the topic.
Yeah. Now, Tom, I gotta really quickly ask you. You know, every year I watch your hunts on the DVDs or the shows, and you're always after a giant. So I'm just curious, do you have one of those special deer this year?
I do. I have one particular deer this year. He's in Iowa, and I'm going after him. His name is Kermit because I passed him for 4 years. He's 7 years old, and I had an encounter with him at this little interior pond in the timber, and there's always a bunch of frogs in it, so we referred to it as Frog Pond. So when he came in, I was like, boy, that deer's going to be special, and he was 3 years old at the time, and we nicknamed him Kermit that year. And so anyway, so 4 years later, yeah, I'm finally hunting him to kill him. So
Whew.
hopefully I'll get a shot this year.
How much internal, I guess, I don't know, you got to have some sort of internal personal
Fortitude.
fortitude. That's the word I'm looking for to hold off on a deer for. Have you had an encounter with him each of those years?
Oh yeah,
Whew.
yeah, absolutely. You know, excuse me. It's just this special farm where I have very very good neighbors, and I'm very blessed in that everyone manages. Now, all my farms I can't do that, but I still always try to pass until at least 4 years old. But in Missouri, where I'm not going to shoot anything under four on that farm. Neighbors are pretty good there as well, but I don't think they're going to let a 6-year-old walk. So it's
Sure.
just, that's just a very rare, that's not going to happen very often. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it's
that's,
interesting to get and it's like you're saying, depending on where your property is or what your situation is, it kind of dictates your management purposes. I know, Dad's changed his thoughts a little bit over the last few years on his Missouri place because, frankly, you just cannot grow them past, 4 years old, 5 years old. It's tough because of the pressure and the roads and the neighbors and
absolutely.
so it's kind of dependent on your geographic location and what your neighbors are
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. I think Drury Outdoors has come a long way to help people actually pass deer, though. They've seen like, hey, if I can talk to my neighbors and in a nice way. I mean, if they don't want to manage, you never pressure them. But if you can talk to your neighbors and say, hey, agree together to pass certain deer, it's pretty fun to just actually pick up their sheds and watch what they turn into the next year. That's probably I enjoy that as much as the kill,
Yeah.
probably more than the kill. So
It's pretty interesting to see that evolution, and you almost become, it's like, well, Mark, with you in Holyfield, you knew him last year, and it's just like you
Hmm.
become ingrained and with this one deer, and it you everybody feels like, oh, that's my deer, or this is my deer, because you got them on picture, but they're not. They're roaming all over the place, and there might be 3 neighbors that have that same deer on their trail cameras. But it's like a family member almost. Like you just can't wait to see them in person, and everything you do, you just think about them, and you look at the pictures over and over. It's pretty amazing, and to even find the shed is amazing, honestly, when you think about how much you got to walk to. It's a needle in a haystack. So it's neat to see you be able to hunt a deer that old.
It is. It's a really weird, like, paradoxical relationship in that, we have this like animal that we're like fascinated with, and like we said, we form some kind of weird relationship with that deer, but at the same time we're trying to kill it, which I think a lot of people from the outside of our little hunting community probably think is really weird. It is a really powerful, cool experience to be able to get to know a deer over multiple years. Like you said, Tom, that's become my favorite thing about, hunting some of these spots where I do have that, where I am fortunate enough to see some of these deer multiple years in a row. It's a huge challenge to try to target one of those deer specifically year after year, and you never know if they're going to make it. But when it does come together, it's really cool. But also, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but it's also kind of sad when it comes together. When you do finally kill that deer that you've been hunting for 3 years, like I've really felt like it's like a weird, like, I don't know, like some mothers talk about this like post, after they have their baby, they have like some kind of depression. It's like this post killing your buck depression where it's like, wow, I'm never going to, get a trail camera picture of Jawbreaker again. I'm never going to go out into the field hoping I'm going to see him this night. So it's a kind of strange, interesting thing that we do.
I've had that experience, but it's because someone else killed the deer I was after.
That's the worst.
I'm still trying to connect to the one that you've been after for a year or two. So I'll let you know how I feel if it ever happens.
I'm sure it'll happen here soon. So I guess with that in mind, though, we should maybe get to our question of the day and get to the good stuff that hopefully lead to us killing some deer here soon.
Absolutely. The question of the day is brought to you by Cabela's, the world's foremost outfitter.
Hi, Mark. My name is Brent Paris, and I'm from Syracuse, New York. My question is about making scrapes, but not Scrapes 101. I'm hoping more for Scrapes 401. When, where, and how are the most effective ways to get a buck to check one out that I've made? How often should a buck come by to consider it a successful scrape? And finally, when should I hunt over that scrape that the buck actually visits? Thanks for your great podcast and your help.
Awesome question. And Tom, I'm curious. Can you give us the details of, how you use mock scrapes, how you make them? All the specifics would be great.
Absolutely. I'm a big guy on using scrapes, whether it's a mock scrape or a real scrape, for camera setups to find what deer are in my woods, and I find out if there's any mature deer I want to hunt. I'm checking those cameras, especially now. In fact, on my Illinois farm, there's a buck I call Batman, and I've been he didn't show up last year until October 2nd. I've been checking those cameras. I just checked him the other day, and he showed up October 7th.
Wow.
And so I was all excited. I texted all my friends a picture, all my hunting buddies, and I'm like, he's back. Batman is alive. And so I use scrapes to find the deer. I do hunt over them, not a lot, but I do. I'll hunt over them if they're on the edges of food plots and stuff like that. But I don't specifically go deep in the woods exploring, trying to find like a big scrape or something to hunt over. I stay out of the timber, and I'll find those scrapes to hang the cameras and find the deer that are in the area, and that's the main use I use them for.
So when you are actually making your own, how do you specifically do that?
I usually just take, I'll put the cameras up in August, late August, right in there. I'll if there's a great scrape branch, I'll take the what do you call it, the handsaw. I just use a handsaw literally, and I try not to touch it myself, but I'll just use that handsaw to kind of knock the leaves off the branch, and then I use it to cut the grass and try to actually make a rub the ground so it's just down to dirt, and those it works like crazy. It works phenomenally. And I use it all on tree coys too. I'll put a tree coy up and put the licking branch out, and then make a mock scrape under that licking branch and face the camera. Usually, a lot of times if I have a box blind, I'll face the camera towards that tree coy, so I know exactly, what deer are in my area and if they're actually in front of what stand at what day, and then I'll check those cameras only with the right wind. So if it's a north wind stand, I'm only going to check those cameras with the north wind, and I usually a lot of times will check them a couple hours before I go hunt to find out which, use MRI and find out which stand I'm going to.
Do you ever put any scent in those mock scrapes or use any kind of attractant like that in relation to them?
I do not. I've embarrassingly I've peed in them myself.
Nothing to be embarrassed about that.
But that works to kind of get them going. But I don't use any scents in them myself. I think it would work though. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
I've tried buck bomb a few times, and I've had some good luck with that. And I know we've tried it over at Dad's Illinois place before and have had success with it. And I know some guys do stuff like that, or some guys use is it Tinks or I've never tried that before, but we have tried buck bomb and had some luck with that. And I have several buddies that do the same thing you do, Tom. They just pee in the scrape themselves. So we always get that question whether you pee in a bottle in your stand or just go. I don't know that it affects them at all. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different.
I read an article years ago on they were studying. I think it was in North American Whitetail magazine, and it was labeled "Urine is urine," and it was talking about and if a buck can tell if it's human urine or another animal's urine, and the consensus was that they really couldn't. So I don't know if it's true. I really honestly don't know, but I know that big bucks come to the scrapes after I do that. So
it can't hurt it then.
Yeah, it doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read an article, and the one I read I think was in Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. This was probably like 8-9 years ago, and they did a study where they had trail cameras over scrape locations, and they had different things in each scrape. So they had one was human urine, one was nothing, and then there was 3 or 4 different, for sale attractants and, some doe and heat stuff, some buck urine, et cetera, et cetera. And they found no noticeable difference between any of them. There was just as much activity from human urine as there was for something you paid $20 for, and there was no negative reaction to that. So that kind of convinced me. So I let it fly now, whether it's on the tree stand or when I'm setting up a new mock scrape.
I do too. I gotta go. I go.
Yeah, on that mock scrape, one of the things that Dad likes to do, if it's early enough in the season, he'll actually bring a weed eater back, and he'll weed eat down to dirt like you're saying, and really get a pretty big size circle going there, so that he always says he wants them to be able to see it from a long ways away and become a destination spot. So he does that a lot, and he'll take in a shovel and a rake and all that good stuff and really make sure the dirt's worked up. And one of the things that he does a lot that I started doing on our lease is cutting all of the like the licking branches all around my area, so they end up going to, whether it's the tree coy that we got in the food plot or what, so they end up having to go to that one spot to hit where you're wanting to hit. And we've had a camera out on, I got the south food plots last bite, and we have a tree coy on it. And all my best pictures have been, it's middle of the night stuff, but of my biggest deer have been on that, and they're just killing the tree coy and and doing their thing. So it definitely, to find out what you got, it's a good tool to utilize.
Can one of you guys talk a little bit about this whole tree coy topic? I'm not sure we've ever really dove into it in detail. What's the value of putting a mock scrape tree out in the middle of a field or food plot? Because I'm doing it now too. But I don't know, Tom, is that something you do too? Can you explain why you do that?
Absolutely. I tell you what, it works phenomenally. When the deer are out feeding in I think deer are very much kind of like a big bass would be to a log. They use it as structure. They want to go mark something. I don't know if it's like a dominance thing where they A lot of times they'll come straight out. If there's other bucks in the food plot, they almost will kind of go over to that tree koi and use it to kind of, do the lick and branch thing, do the scrape. It gets them fired up, like, hey, this is my plot. What are you doing here? And it just works. It draws them right in front of wherever you want them to be. As if you have a tree stand or a box blind or a ground blind, you can put it. I put mine 20 to 25 yards. I try to put them about 20, actually, yards in front. The 25, I notice sometimes I miss the shot. No, I make them as close as I can, so it's a chip shot, and it really works great. I got them in almost every single one of my food plots.
I have them in both of our food plots, and Mark always said it's a fish of structure, like you're talking about, and it's like a magnet almost. And when Dad told me about cutting all the other branches, it's not like that's some earth-shattering thought, but it really dawned on me. It's like, well, I guess that really makes sense. If they got no other options, they will come straight to that thing to, like you said, to kind of show off and prove that they're the man in the area, and if you got in the right spot, you're going to have that shot. And now that's the one thing that Mark always preaches on, is making sure whether you're using a real tree or one of the fake decoy tree kois out there that are available, make sure that your limbs are turned so that you have a broadside shot. Because if you have the limb facing you, you're going to have a butt facing you. You know what I mean? So you got to be careful of that.
I've got an issue on one of mine. I did not do a good enough job planting my fake tree, so I made my own. And I just didn't dig the hole deep enough, I guess, because now this tree spins around with the wind. So one day it's facing away from me, one day it's facing towards me. And I haven't been out there. I've got a wireless trail camera on it, so I haven't actually been out there to mess around with it. But I know one of these days I'm going to have to, hopefully it's after I shoot a buck, then I can go fix it. I'd rather not mess around with it and put my scent everywhere. Yeah. But it's less than ideal.
Yeah. Hey, you got to go deep. I had the same problem, and Mark, and it was I actually started using Quickcrete, and then I didn't want to pull that big chunk of concrete out every year with the tractor, so I actually use a tractor's what's it called, auger, and it's connected to the tractor, and we put them in September, and just we go deep, and we usually try to get actually a pretty big tree, and sometimes I use the tree koi, actually the one put out by Flambeau. So
on our lease, the staging area that we hunt all the time, I was just telling Dad this morning about it. There's like 4 little locust trees. All these deer come out of the timber, and then right in front of us are like these 4 locust trees, and they always hit one of them, like the licking branch or whatever, and then they move on. And he's like, you need to cut those out and leave just one of them, because I told him, I was like, you can never get a shot because it's so brushy right there with the locust tree. You just can't get through there. They always stop at the furthest one back. And he's like, you should just cut the 3 furthest one, and you just got the one closest one. And so there's sometimes in your certain areas, there's already a tree that's there that you just need to kind of maybe cultivate around it to make it work for you, so you don't have to put one in. Yeah.
I like this idea too, whether it be with a tree, a scrape tree koi, this type of thing, a field tree koi where you're putting it out in the middle of a food plot, or you've got a mock scrape, back in the timber by your tree stand. I think it's just another one of these little chips you can put in your favor. If you can stack the odds one little thing at a time, this is one of those ways to do that, and eventually that's going to lead to success. Like we talked about, if this just causes that deer to come 10 yards closer to your tree stand, hey, that's a big win. Or if this little mock scrape back in the timber, causes that deer to pause for 10 seconds versus, walking through really quickly, that could be the difference between just seeing that big buck and getting a shot. Or like you just mentioned, Matt, sometimes removing something so that it's going to improve that shot opportunity. I think with scrapes, there's lots of different ways here where you can just tweak things a little bit or add one little thing in your favor that, scrapes may not make or break your season, but it might be the little 2% difference that in the end does make the big difference. Mm-hmm. So it's something to keep in mind for sure.
So, Tom, is there a certain time of year that you would not put, like, okay, I'm to this point in the season, I'm not going to put a new mock scrape out. Like I know that Dad does it a lot in late summer, like August, when he
Yeah.
starts his. Is there a time like right now, October, where you'd be like, no, I'm not going to start one myself. I'm going to rely on one
No,
that's
I think
already
you can.
out
I
there?
think start one now in mid-October. They are. I mean, I would be moving your cameras today if you haven't to scrapes, because you're basically taking an inventory of your bucks. If you move it to a big scrape, not just one that's been hit once, but one that you can tell they're hitting, especially on a food source on the edge of a cornfield, bean field, alfalfa, whether it's a food plot, that's even better. If you can move those cameras to the scrapes, whether you have to make a mock scrape yourself, that's fine too. Especially if it's on a food plot or on an area, maybe a trail's coming out from the timber and there's an overhanging branch right there where you can make a mock scrape. Yeah, I'd definitely say I don't think it's not going to hurt anything. Especially if you can take a saw or a rake or something like that and just go in there and rough up the ground and put a camera on a little tree right in front of it. You're going to get almost every big buck on your farm or in that area hitting that scrape. It's amazing. It's a wonderful tool to use to inventory and find out what's on your property.
Awesome.
Now, what about hunting over scrapes? I just talked about how a scrape maybe will help you a little bit with that pause or whatever it is. But do you ever actually target a scraping location as like, I want to hunt back here in the timber because of a scrape? Is that something you ever do, or is there a situation where you would do that?
I have in the past, years ago, but I honestly do not now. The only time I hunt over scrapes is, of course, the tree koi situation, or there might be scrapes on the side of the food plots I'm hunting. But I don't specifically, target a scrape inside deep timber and go looking, just because I'm very low pressure, and I do not go into I don't go into the deep timber. Literally, I don't hunt deep timber. I hunt edges and I hunt food.
Interesting. It definitely seems like, I think that's more and more the case today. I think back in the day, scrapes were something that people really keyed in on. And then there's been a lot of more recent research that just shows that so much of that scraping activity is actually happening at night. So,
Well, think about it this way too. I mean, back in the day, there weren't cameras like they're using more of their woodsmanship back then. So they're keying in on scrapes and rub lines and anything like that. And, you're hunting the timber. There weren't a lot of food plots back then. So, yeah, they were focused back then on those type of things, because how else do you know what deer you have other than maybe shed hunting? But even back 20 years ago, you didn't hear of a lot of people shed hunting.
Yeah.
So I think it's just an evolution of hunting more than anything. That it's not as much as a needed, like, I have to. Okay, I found a scrape in the timber. I know they're around here. I gotta sit over this. Well, you got the cameras out now. You're gonna know they're around there. If you got 2 cameras out on your property, you're going to find out what deer you have just by setting it on a scrape. So you don't have to post up and hunt over it necessarily. I mean, that's kind of my take on it. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think a situation where you might be hunting over a scrape is, let's say you have a 40-acre parcel or permission to hunt a neighbor's, and maybe it's all timber. Maybe you don't have a food source. Or most people probably don't have food plots. They just have to hunt. They might be hunting an ag field or a grass hay field or where the deer are feeding, or just a edge of a cut cornfield or something like that. In that situation, maybe they're hunting acorns, in the timber. And that's a situation where you probably are forced to actually go do a little scouting, find out which trees have the acorns, hopefully before now. But if you haven't until now, you still got to go. And you got to go in your timber. You got to find out which oak trees are producing the acorns, and then maybe look for some scrapes around those areas and set up with the wind on it, maybe where your wind's blowing over a valley or somewhere the deer are not bedding or not coming to and from. So, yeah, if that situation, I would definitely hunt scrapes, inside the timber, something like that.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And one thing to keep in mind, while most, like I mentioned a little earlier, most studies have shown that the majority of that scraping activity is after dark. there is one period of time where it does start to peak, and we're entering that right now. The last 10 days of October, supposedly, according to, I think most people, I think anecdotally see this too, but these studies have shown that last 10 days of October are when your greatest chance of some type of daylight scraping activity or just scraping activity in general is going to happen. So if you're going to try something like this, these coming weeks are probably your best shot at maybe being able to capitalize on that. So
yeah, absolutely. I'd move your cameras right now to get those cameras on the scrapes. You're going to get an inventory of a lot of those big bucks. Maybe not every big buck in your area, but most of them will be hitting scrapes here coming up in the next 2 weeks. This 2-week time frame from here to November 1st.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you think should be covered, either when it comes to how you're setting up your trail cameras on those scrapes, or one of the things he asked was, how do you determine if a mock scrape is a success or not? And I don't know if there's a good way to answer that. For me, it's, do I see deer hitting it? I mean, are bucks showing up on my trail camera? If that happens for me,
I get pictures?
I view it as, yeah. Do you guys feel differently?
Absolutely. And if they're hitting it regularly and not just, a big buck comes one time and is gone. If he's coming back and checking it every night or every other night, or it almost sometimes you can see, seen those big bucks come into a food plot with the tree koi situation, back to the tree koi, actually walk in. This is usually in November. They'll walk in, hit the tree koi, scrape it, kind of look around. Oh, there's no does here. Boom, they're on to the next one. And it's almost like they're a doctor and they're making their rounds in the hospital, and they're going to check and see where that doe is, and they're looking. So that's those scrapes are good for that. It draws them to a point where you're going to be, and that's another thing to talk about is how you check your cameras on the scrape. You got to, I mentioned earlier, you got to wait for the right wind, but you got to also make sure your path of you're not walking over that scrape to get to your camera. You want to make sure that you check it and you're very cognizant of where that camera sits to where you're going to walk, so they don't smell you.
That's a great point. Now this is something I always kind of struggle with internally in my head when I'm going to check one of those cameras. Sometimes I'll come up on one of those locations and the scrape hasn't been freshened up in a long time, or leaves have fallen and they've covered it up. And so usually what I've done is I have refreshened it up with my boots and kicked it up and stuff, and I just spray like some scent eliminating spray over where I was kicking around, or some nose jammer or something like that, just to make sure they don't smell human there. Is that something you do, or do you avoid that completely to avoid any risk?
I do. I don't use my boot, but I just grab a stick, and I'll use the other end of the stick, and I just freshen it up. Yes, I absolutely do that every time. I don't know if the boot hurts it. I'm not saying that hurts it. I just know that if you ever take a rubber boot and smell it yourself, if I can smell a rubber boot, I figure they can, because I don't have a very good nose.
Yeah.
But a stick, I figured, if I'm not using the end I grabbed, then I think that's fine.
Definitely. All right. Well, anything else, guys, on this topic? I feel like I hope we've done a good job of covering the 401 of scrapes. This has been some good stuff, I think.
At least 301.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
I hope we answered
else.
Brent's question. So
awesome.
Oh,
awesome.
I need to get to the farm and move some cameras, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
it's that time of year.
The very last note I wrote down on Brent's question is when to hunt it. I again just go back to the simple thing of check those cameras. When are they there? And if you got daylight, that's when I'd be hunting them. So.
Well, what if it's been all middle of the night type movement, but like a cold front comes through, or you're hitting the last couple days of October when you just kind of take a gamble if you got the right wind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you never know if the camera's over a scrape that's on a food plot, or food source, he might be out in that food source. You just don't have pictures of him there during that time. So yeah, absolutely, Matt, for sure.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because just the other day we had an encounter at my lease with this big deer we're chasing, and of course I got a camera on a fence post facing the other side of where he came out of, and we hadn't been getting him for a while, and my camera guy Aaron Bennett even said, he goes, it just goes to show you the cameras don't show you everything, and it you wouldn't know that unless you were there and saw him with your own eyes. So just because he didn't have the picture didn't mean he wasn't right through there.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So true. Yeah, I've got a similar situation in Michigan. I've got this buck that we've been talking about the past couple months, Holyfield. I'm not getting him on camera, but I'm seeing him. So exactly like you said, if I weren't actually out there scouting from a distance, I would think he's gone.
Yeah.
But he's actually right there. He just most of the time he's not walking right past that camera. So sometimes you don't get them all.
Yeah.
But scrapes are definitely one of your best chances to try to get them.
Yeah.
So. Well,
now,
that
Mark,
said,
you said you got that buck called Holyfield. I got a buck on my farm I call Holyfield too. Now, has he got a big chunk out of his ear too?
Yes, he does.
I actually do too, but I haven't gotten any pictures of him since this summer. I haven't brought him up, but yeah, it's amazing. Everybody focuses on whatever a characteristic is, and it seems like that notch in the ear is the Holyfield's the easy go-to.
It is. Maybe we got to get more creative.
Well, we could call him Tyson.
I actually had a second buck on this farm show up. When I had the second shooter, I was like, well, should I have Holyfield and Tyson? And my wife vetoed that one for some reason, so the name's still up in the air.
Gotcha.
All right, well, I think with that, we should wrap this one up. So thank you, Tom, for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. Great insight. And for anyone right now who would like to ask a question in the future, you can do that if you go to wiredtohunt.com/100%wild, and you could submit your own question for us to tackle on a future episode. Also, one final update from me, make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you want the audio version. You can go to iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or even wiredhunt.com. You can listen to it in all those different places. And then also, of course, the video version is over on the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel, which Matt can tell you more about.
Absolutely. Check out the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to it to get all of our updates. Tom, for instance, we got several new hunts that have never appeared anywhere else that Tom filmed last fall that are only on our YouTube channel, and we're trying to do 1 or 2 new originals every week, plus we're putting up an episode of Natural Born, and so we're populating with a ton of content right now, the podcast, so make sure and check it out. And as always, you can always check us out on DruryOutdoors.com, follow our journal, see how the team's doing, see what's dying across the country, and maybe help capitalize and pick your time to get out into the woods. And as always, social media at Drury Outdoors on Twitter, Instagram, official Drury Outdoors on Facebook, and Mark and Terry have been coming to us live with some Facebook updates as far as like reporting what's going on at this time of the season, so you can get some of that up to the minute access to help you make a decision on where you want to go hunt. So check us out, and hopefully we can lend a hand.
Sounds a good plan. Well, thank you again, Tom. Thank you, Matt, and thanks everyone for listening.
Peace.